Welcome everyone to the Embrace Fertility show. Today is another one of our fertility expert interviews. Today we're talking to Kirstin about her book, This is Infertility, which is a story of her 6-year journey through IUIs, IVF, miscarriage, and then gestational surrogacy. She is going to share her beautiful story with us and then talk to us about why she decided to write the book and what you can expect from reading it. I enjoyed this conversation. I always enjoy talking to my colleagues and inviting them on the podcast, but this episode feels super special. I really hope you enjoy it. Hello, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So we're going to have a bit of a chat today. So let's start off. Could you tell us a bit more about your own personal journey?
Yes, so our son Spencer was born in 2019 through gestational surrogacy in the US. So we're from Melbourne, Australia. But we did surrogacy through the US. And as you mentioned, this was after a 6-year IVF and surrogacy journey. So, I mean, basically, to give a bit of an overview, because there's quite a bit in our journey, but to give an overview, my husband Ryan and I married in 2011, and we thought that we would fall pregnant straight away. I think, like many people assume, we're in our early 30s then. There wasn't any fertility issues that I was aware of. So we thought, oh, well, we'll fall pregnant pretty quickly. And at about the 9-month mark of trying, we still weren't pregnant. And, it's starting to get, like, I was starting to get quite upset at this stage. And so we went to go see a fertility specialist, but just to have some of the standard tests done, check my hormone levels and egg reserve, that sort of thing. And at that appointment, the specialist recommended that we try Clomid. So we did a few months of Clomid, the medication to help you ovulate, and that didn't work. And so then we tried IUI, which, if anyone who's not familiar, is where, they track your ovulation with ultrasounds, and then when you're due to ovulate, they pop a catheter up there with your husband's sperm, and bingo. And we thought, oh, this will definitely work. Like, IUI just sounds like, we definitely fall pregnant. And that didn't work. We did that for about 4 months. And then we changed to another specialist who was more focused on IVF, and she recommended that we try IVF. And so we started to do IVF cycles, and the first couple of cycles failed. And then the next couple of cycles, I then started to have cancelled cycles because my endometrium lining, which I had no idea what the endometrium lining was at that point, but the specialist was saying, it's too thin to transfer. So in Australia, it needs to be 6 millimeters or more thickness to do a transfer. And I know in the US, it needs to be 8 millimeters or more. And I'm not sure what it is in the UK, but either way, my lining was always like in the 4s and 5s. So she was like, that's just too thin. So I kept having these cancelled cycles, which were really upsetting because, I would go to all the appointments and I would take all the medication, and I'd get to almost like day 20, and then they'd say, oh no, we have to cancel. Like, it's just not, it's not getting it like any more thick. And so we basically then changed to another specialist because the specialist we were seeing kind of just didn't have any answers. So she was just kind of saying, oh, we'll just keep trying. And we're at this stage where we're transferring in PGS embryos as well, so genetically tested embryos. And I was just like, why is it not working? And, or why are these cycles keep getting cancelled with this thin lining? And she was kind of brushing it off like, oh, it's no big deal, we'll just keep trying. So changed to this other specialist who was focused on implantation issues. And at that first appointment, he actually said, I think you need to do surrogacy. And I was just like, whoa, wait, hang on a second, like completely overwhelmed. And, he just sort of, highlighted that lining issues are very difficult to treat, and they really know the cause, and that surrogacy was really our best bet. But in Australia, it's not very common. In some Australian states, actually illegal to do surrogacy. Commercial surrogacy is banned. There's no agencies. Hadn't ever met a surrogate or had known anyone that done surrogacy. So it was just a lot of information to take in. So we basically said, oh no, we're just not quite there yet. Like, can we keep trying ourselves? And he said, yeah, sure. Like, we'll give it a go. So we tried another cycle, and he was actually able to get the lining up just to like the minimum to transfer, which was great. And I did fall pregnant, and it was with a PGS embryo that we transferred in. And so I did fall pregnant, but then we went for the first ultrasound, which was just over 7 weeks. And, it was at that ultrasound that I learnt that we had a miscarriage. So the baby's heartbeat was too slow and it was measuring too small. And, they said, look, this pregnancy isn't viable and you'll inevitably miscarry. And we went back a couple of days later, and the baby's heartbeat had stopped at that point. So we're absolutely devastated, as you can imagine. And we then miscarried, and then we had 3 months off before we tried again. And then we did try again another time, and it was then just a failed transfer the next time. And so at that point, after doing everything for a few years at that point, we're like, right, we need to listen to the expert. Like, we will do surrogacy after all. So we decided to do surrogacy, and we first actually started surrogacy in Canada, and which Canada does altruistic surrogacy. And we flew over for the transfer, and we transported over our embryos to a clinic in Canada, and we had actually found a surrogate really quickly, this lovely woman called Julie, and we'd been matched with her through an agency, and we had a really great rapport with her. And we flew over from Melbourne to Toronto, which is such a long flight, to do the transfer. And we went to the clinic, and the transfer time sort of came and went, and we were kind of all sitting in reception just wondering what the delay was. And eventually a nurse came out and said, oh, the specialist would like to talk to you and Ryan. And so, we went back to see the specialist, and he said, I'm so sorry, but we went to, we opened the container to thaw your embryos, and the container was empty. And so the embryo, so the embryos that we had transported over were in the container. And I feel like this was the lowest point in our journey, because it was just something that we just didn't expect. So I think with everything else along the way with our journey, like, as heartbreaking as, like, you always think, oh, a miscarriage is a possibility, or doing an egg collection, not getting eggs is a possibility, or a cancelled cycle is a possibility. But the container being empty, I was like, that had never even entered, that scenario had never even crossed my mind, because transporting eggs, sperm, embryos, it's common practice. Like, people transport every week, whether they're changing clinics or they're doing surrogacy. And when we talked to our clinic here and the one in Canada, and a lawyer that we met with as well, they'd never heard of this happening. Like, so they were like, the odds of this happening are just ridiculously low, and they never worked out what happened. So they said, the possibilities were either the container wasn't packed correctly, like at our Melbourne clinic, or it was x-rayed in transit and it's not meant to be x-rayed, or it was unpacked incorrectly at the other end. But either way, we never found out what happened. And so we're absolutely devastated. We're halfway across the world at this stage as well, which was just really difficult, because when something awful happens, you just want to be with your friends and family, and you're in your home. And so we got back as fast as we could back to Melbourne. And after that experience, we decided to change to the US and do surrogacy in the US. And so we went through a surrogacy agency in the US and matched with our beautiful surrogate Leah, who, again, we just had that instant connection and rapport with Leah and her husband Josh. And so we went ahead and we did a transfer, and the first transfer failed, and the second transfer we fell pregnant. And as you can imagine, we're absolutely ecstatic, and I was like, oh, it's all happening now. And because I'd always thought when we got to surrogacy, I was like, we've now removed the infertility, because we had, the genetically tested embryos. We had a surrogate who had 2 boys of her own and had been a surrogate previously as well. And then, then I wasn't in the picture anymore. So I was like, we'll remove the infertility. So this will definitely work. And we had a scan at 7 weeks and it was fine. Like, it was great. Baby was measuring well, heartbeat was strong, everything looked perfect. Leah's hormone levels were high. And then the next scan was at 9 weeks, just over 9 weeks. And the time difference meant that it was going to be 3 a.m. our time. And given everything was going along so well, Leah said, and we agreed, like, why don't we video the scan and we'll take some photos. And then when you wake up, let's all Skype. And yeah, it makes sense. So I woke up at about 6 a.m. because, just woke up and I was like, oh, wide awake. And I checked my phone and there were no messages. And just the minute there was no message on my phone, I was like, oh, just had that awful feeling in my stomach, that awful dread that something's not right, because Leah's like a wonderful communicator, and I just expected to wake up to 20 messages and videos, and so my husband Ryan was asleep next to me, and I could see his phone was on the bedside table, and so I walked over to his phone and I saw on his phone there was a WhatsApp message from Josh, Leah's husband, and it just said, "I'm so sorry, but we've lost the baby." And it's like, oh, not again. It was just devastating. It was a really, really difficult time. And I think, for Leah, it was really, really hard because, she'd never experienced anything like that. And she also just had this awful guilt that, she'd let us down and it was her fault. And as we know, miscarriage is completely outside anyone's control. And it was certainly nothing she did or didn't do. But she had this awful guilt until we spoke to her. Like, we spoke to her, as soon as we could. And I think she felt a bit better when we spoke to her, but we were all so upset. And again, they're in America, we're in Australia. All we wanted to do was be together, and we couldn't. We could just, Skype. So that was a really, really difficult time as well. And then, so at this point, after years of everything, I thought, oh, well, this is just never going to happen. And, I think that we just need to accept it and move on. But we had one last transfer in the contract with Leah, the surrogacy contract. And, Leah was determined to help us, didn't want this to be the end of our story. And my husband, Ryan, was also very keen to try again. And I was like, fine, we'll try again, just whatever. And so tried again.
Just do it. There's no point.
Do it, And of course, that's a transfer that worked, and we fell pregnant, and 9 months later our beautiful son Spencer was born. So happy ending in the end. And we actually stayed with Leah and Josh. So we flew over 2 weeks before the birth, and then we were there for 3 weeks after Spencer was born, and for 5 weeks we all lived together, which was really lovely. And we're still all very close. So we regularly talk, and they always send presents for birthday and Christmas for Spencer, and we're going over next year to see them. And so it's been a really beautiful relationship. It was such a beautiful experience as well. So it was all happy in the end, but it was a bit of some challenges and heartbreak along the way. So
I think
that's the overview of the story. Yeah. I don't there's a lot to it. So as covered in the book, there's a lot in the book.
Thank you so much. I think it's so important that we share these stories and people hear that you went through so much, but you have Spencer today. And it's not to say it's like, just keep going at whatever cost, but it's to show that even though, all these things happening aren't like someone or something going, you're not meant to be a parent. They're just, they're blocks along the way. And then you've ended up as, and how old is Spencer now?
He's 3.
He's 3, yeah.
Yes,
so
born in 2019.
Half of the time that you were, sorry, let's put that in there. Half the time that you were trying, you've now had 3 years with Spencer as well. And then it gets to like 6 years, 9 years, and continue.
Yeah, of
And
course.
the infertility bit becomes smaller than the time with your child. And I think that's can be quite a milestone for us as well. When we've tried for so long, when you reach that milestone, it's like it's been the same amount of time now as we were trying that they've been here. There's something about
I love
that balance as
I
well.
love that. That's
Thank you so
really,
much for
really
sharing
nice.
so many, and I'm so glad that you have written this into a book and shared your story, because you've been through so many of the different avenues to try and get pregnant and face so many things. So I think a lot of people as well think, oh, we'll go to surrogacy, bing bang bosh, the infertility is behind us, the problems are behind us. But especially, like, I can only imagine when you realize that tank was empty, just like some like cruel joke, like
absolutely. And you're right, like I did feel like that, you know, I did become a bit superstitious, like you were saying. Like I was thinking, oh, maybe it's just not meant to be, maybe we're not meant to be parents, and someone up there is, you know, has this plan in place that we're not meant to be parents. And you know, I actually was talking to a counsellor and a hypnotherapist at the time, and she was like, you know, your thoughts and feelings have no bearing on the outcome. Like, just, you know, you might be thinking that there's someone up there who's conspiring, but that's not influencing the outcome. Like, you know, like it's you know, natural to feel that way, but it's not your thoughts and feelings won't influence the outcome.
We want an answer, don't we? It's like we can't work out why these things happen, so we're desperate. We're like, if I could just have an answer, if I could just have a reason. And so sometimes we pin a reason, we're like, oh, it must be that the universe or God is saying no, it's not meant to be. Whereas that is the case, because now you have Spencer.
And so that's right, I was wrong.
The impact. So like, thank you so much for sharing your story, because it's showing people as well that it's like, you don't need to, and it's about getting that support. So like I said, you know, again, that's going through it, that I imagine allowed you to be able to keep going. Because at any point along that journey, you could have been like, you know what, this is just too hard. I cannot keep doing this, because more couples either stop or just don't commence treatment based on you know, on it being emotionally too hard, the medical prognosis, financial constraints. Then there's those people that literally just like, this is too hard, I'm not doing this anymore. Whereas if you're getting that emotional support to allow you to go, this is so hard, and what's the next step? What can I do? How can I move forward?
Yes, absolutely. And you're so right. Like, the support is just vital. So, you know, we had great family and friend support, but as I mentioned, I was also seeing a counsellor and hypnotherapist who was amazing as well. And I saw her for a couple of years. And, you know, if I didn't have that community and that support, I think you're right. Like, it's just essential. Don't know how you could do it otherwise. But,
and I think sometimes people leave it until they are absolutely at breaking point. They've hit rock bottom, and then they're like, oh, now I find some help. And this is why I love like the work you're doing with IVF Babble as well. You're like, you don't need to wait until you're on your knees to get support. No. You can
absolutely
get support before you need support. Get support because we could all do with more support in our lives, no matter what we're dealing with. But if you're dealing with infertility, and it touches, you know, it infiltrates every area of your life, your relationships, health, your well-being, your work,
everything.
And so to try and compartmentalize and just go, I'm not going to think about it while I'm at work, I'll stick it over here. But it all comes in. So you might need to be doing shots, you might need to go appointments. It's always there in your head of like, well, am I going to be going on maternity leave next year and I don't know, and how's that going to impact my work?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, the like when I first started to see the counsellor and hypnotherapist I was seeing, you're right, like I wish I'd seen her earlier, because I saw her when we had our miscarriage, when I had my miscarriage, and it was shortly after, probably a month after the miscarriage, I ended up in hospital with pneumonia. And, I hadn't even been on antibiotics for like, gosh, I don't know, 15 years or something. Like I hadn't had more than a mild cold for 15 years or something. And all of a sudden, it's like 3 weeks after miscarriage and I'm having these breathing difficulties. Like I went to the doctor, she was like, I think you've got pneumonia, but I think you need to go to like it's quite serious, got to go to the hospital. And I had pleurisy, like the inflammation of the lungs and everything. And I was in hospital for like a week, in my 30s with pneumonia. And they kept saying, oh, do you smoke? I'm like, no, I don't smoke. Like it's almost like they didn't believe. They're like, but you're only in your 30s.
Like nothing.
They're like, but usually it's, people who have pneumonia are like much older or they've got underlying health issues or they're smokers and you're like this healthy girl in your 30s. And I was like, yeah, but I've had this awful emotional stuff I've been going through.
Yeah.
So, and then it was after that once, I recovered from the miscarriage and the pneumonia and a friend said, oh, I've got this hypnotherapist that I've been seeing also for fertility issues. And she's like, do you want to maybe give her a try? And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And then, yeah. So, but you're right, like getting the help sooner rather than later is also so important, I think.
Because I think I don't think I've met anyone who's gone, oh, this has been really helpful, but I wish I'd waited. I wish I'd just left it another 6 months. Like no one has ever said it that way around. There's always been like,
so
I wish I'd come 6 months earlier.
So true. That's a really good point, actually.
Like I don't think anyone's that in session gone, this is great, but I probably don't really need this yet. Like I'll come back.
Yeah, too soon, too early. No, that's so true. It's always, I wish I'd come sooner.
So talk to us about why you decided to write the book.
Yeah, so when Spencer was about 9 months old, COVID hit. And I think one of the very few silver linings of COVID was that it gave me some time to pause and reflect. And I think I found throughout our journey, there was limited resources and support. I think there's a lot more available now, but when we were going through everything, there wasn't really a very active TTC community, online community. There wasn't that many books. There wasn't really many infertility coaches and hypnotherapists. There wasn't a lot of support. And so I was really keen to share our story and everything that we learned. And so when the lockdown started in Melbourne and I had a bit of time on my hands and Spencer was still quite young, so he was napping quite a bit during the day, I decided to start writing. And then once I started, once you start, you just can't stop. Like the words just poured out of me because I think, as any writer knows, the best thing you can do is to write what you know. And having been through it for 6 years, it was something that I knew. So I really enjoyed the process. I found it quite therapeutic as well. And, I really want my book to be able to help people who have infertility because it's a real mix. The book, I'll just quickly see it.
And I love the cover.
I know they did a really good job, the publisher, a really good job. But it's a real mix of sort of factual insights into surrogacy and IVF and then our personal experience. And, I share all our positive experiences with infertility, with surrogacy, especially our relationship with Leah and Josh and the wonderful surrogacy experience that we had. But I'm also very honest about the challenges that we faced and the obstacles and the heartbreak and everything that we learned from it. And yeah, just really hope that it will help people who are who have infertility.
I think that's what's so beautiful about reading a book, that you're sharing that information, but you're sharing your personal experiences on what you went through. I imagine that includes things that you know, a lot of the time we say is that we write the book that we wish that we had if you maybe had if you had more stories, more inspiration, people that you could look to, that you could learn from while you were going through it, rather than feeling I think that's the joy now, like social media and like especially the fertility community on Instagram. It's now more acceptable, like even if you're doing that anonymously, but to share your experiences and to talk and to learn so much from from other women or other couples going through it. rather than just looking at like the medical pages or reading books that are very much like, and then there's the sperm and there's the egg, and then you're like, well, yes, that's what's supposed to happen, but for some reason it's not happening for me, and I don't understand why, and no one can really tell me. They're just telling me, we don't really know why, however, do IUI. We don't really know, that's not word, do IVF. We don't really know what, you know, that thing, whereas the more it's like, just do these things, whereas then sometimes in hindsight you look back and you go, well, that probably wasn't the best thing for me, however, you had to go through that to get to that understanding of our bodies and where we were. And you said about the book being very, very healing. So that's how I started writing mine. Is like, it was my journal. It was me pouring out what I was feeling. So did you find that you were writing and it sort of, it helped you sort of, because you know, all that you've been through, to then be a mum after all of that, I think to have that space to write and reflect must have been really, really helpful.
Oh, it was really helpful. And there's a lot of tears as I was writing, which, you know, I think was also very healthy, very healing as well, just to, you know, let out a lot of emotions, because, you know, there are points along the way where you kind of repress your emotions a little bit. And so it felt really good just to get it all out. And then just feeling at the end of it, just this overwhelming sense of gratitude as well. Just gratitude for, I suppose, for IVF as an option, and gratitude for surrogacy, and gratitude obviously for Leah as our surrogate, and of course gratitude for Spencer. So it was a really lovely experience that I really enjoyed.
And I think that's what can be so powerful as well, that I talk about that in Embrace Fertility method, that we can have these silver linings, that while we're going through, and it's not like you can look for them, but it's more that they kind of just come and are shown to you. And it might be quite a lot later. I say, look, while you're in the thick of it, you don't need to like force yourself to find the positives. Like, you know, you can have a gratitude practice and you can look, but don't try and like force yourself to go, and what am I learning from this, and what is thing, but naturally that happens. And that, you know, like the post-traumatic growth, when we've been through something very traumatic, natural that we learn and grow and develop. And I found that as I reached that point, like while I was still going through infertility, because I retrained and I was then being a therapist and through it, so I had that moment of gratitude for my infertility, even though I hated it because I still didn't have a baby. And it was this really place. So a lot of my writing and my blogs are from that perspective. And there's people say to me, it's like, oh, how did you sort of find this acceptance like while you were sitting in it? I was like, it's kind of quite different. That I think because I flipped it, and then that was then my career and my passion.
Absolutely.
So many, it's more like once you've had your baby and then you look back when it's an experience in your past, it's over, it's done. Absolutely. And then you go, well, actually, I did learn this and this, but at the time you're like, oh, why is this happening?
Yeah, so true. And there were definitely points along the way where, you know, I felt quite negative, which I think is natural. And, you know, I remember so clearly my husband at one point was like, don't look for reasons for it not to work, Kirstin. I'm like, can't help it. Like, you know, after so many you know, setbacks, I think, you know, especially towards the end, I was like, nah, it's not going to work, you know. And then when, you know, like say when we had our first failed transfer with Leah, I was like, well, I told you so. You know, and I was like, well, that's so not a good, I was not in a good mindset. But, you know, I think you can only take so much. And, you know, I think you know, it can be natural to have those negative thoughts, or like we talked about before, have those thoughts of, you know, superstition, someone's out to get you and everything. But once you're at the end of it, it's, you know, there's a great reflection piece. Absolutely.
And that thing is like, so many of us, it's a protection method that when we're going through, and, you know, especially that we're going into treatment, we're telling ourselves it's not going to work. It's not going to, we want it to work, but it's not going to work, to try and protect ourselves. This is something I was working with a client last week, actually, that she was like, I can't let myself believe that this cycle might work, because it's never worked before. And if I allow myself to hope, it's going to hurt so much more when it fails.
when it fails.
And so
Yeah,
we were
that makes
thinking about,
perfect
like,
sense.
what percentage of you believes that it's going to fail? What percentage of you believes it's going to work? Because I was like, there must be part of you that believes it will work. Otherwise, you wouldn't be handing over your money, and you wouldn't be doing the shots, and you wouldn't be rocking up to the shots. Like, if you 100% believed it didn't work, you'd just stop, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You wouldn't be going through it, because to go through
Really
IVF,
good
you have to have the
perspective.
commitment, don't you? You're like, this is really hard, but
Yeah.
at the end is I could get to have my baby.
Yes.
So
Yes,
we were
true.
talking about these two parts of her and marrying the hope, and then the part of her that was telling her it wasn't going to work. And then we basically those parts of it as if they were like little personalities. And the root, the one that was saying it's not going to work, was trying to protect her heart and was saying, I don't believe, because it's not going to work. And then above that, I was like, well, why is it saying that? It's saying that because it wants you to be happy. It wants you to be safe. It wants to keep you safe. The part of you that's saying it is going to work, what's that part saying? It wants you to be happy. It wants you to be safe. So we then married the two parts in a hypnotherapy technique so that she could still have this healthy realism, because it very much, we can go into this like toxic positivity of like, it's going to work, it's going to work, it hasn't worked. Now I feel like a fool because I really believe it's going to work. Healthy optimism of, it does work. It does work for a lot of people. Otherwise, none of us would do it. Even if it's like a 15% chance, we wouldn't be doing it unless there was something.
Yeah. And you're right, because it's so involved as well. So you're right. I had never even thought of it from that perspective. But you're right. If you thought that absolutely it's not going to work, then you wouldn't spend weeks having medication injections and ultrasounds and appointments and everything if you thought, oh, there's just no chance. So that's a really good perspective.
If people are feeling like that, it's quite a good exercise as well. If you feel like you're being pushed into treatment either by your doctor or your partner or what you logically think you should be doing, to then say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to do it. I'm not doing it. I refuse. And then sit with what comes up. Because if someone took that opportunity away from you, because this is what my husband did too, as we won an IVF cycle at like really fancy clinic in London, and we were sat in the waiting room. Oh no, Mum, he was sat in the waiting room. I was pacing, and I was like, I don't want to do treatment again. I don't want to be here naturally. And he was like, let's just go. We're not paying anything. Want it in a competition? Let's just. And he literally got up, got his coat, and went, let's go. And then I was like, well, no, hang on, maybe I do, because I knew I was like, this could be it. This could be our chance. Whereas when he then like took it away from me, I was like, no, I give it back. Do you want it?
Yeah, so true. That's such a good point. I love that perspective. Yeah, that's a really good technique as well. That would have been handy.
And I think this is why I like
that.
Talk about a lot of these things on the podcast as well, that it's, even if someone can't or doesn't want to work with a therapist one-to-one, you can start talking to yourself and being your own therapist and just trying some of these techniques yourself. And so I talk about that particular one. I think it was in last week's episode or the one before. Check it. I'll put it in the show notes which one it was. Really, it's entitled something like my fertility specialist wants me to do IVF, but I don't want to. It's something like that, like how to decide when to recommence or when to start treatment. And I talk about sort of the emotional and the energetic elements of that. So yes, people can get that episode. Okay, so talk to us a bit about like, what can people expect when they read your book? Who is this book for?
Yes. So for anyone going through infertility, and also people who might want to support someone going through infertility. So as I mentioned, it covers a lot of factual insights into surrogacy and IVF. And given we experience quite a lot in our journey, it does cover quite a bit. So, we'll cover in depth about IUI and IVF and miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy and surrogacy, both commercial and altruistic. So there's a lot in there. But then I also talk about some of the misconceptions with infertility and how people can best support people going through infertility. And so that's where maybe a friend or a family member who has someone going through infertility would find it useful as well. Because I talk about, for example, one of the biggest misconceptions, I certainly came across it a lot, was when people say you just need to relax.
That really helps, doesn't it? It's like,
no
just
to roll the eyes
and relax.
Oh, it's like, goodness,
it makes me want to punch people in the face. It's like, it just makes me angry.
There was nothing more infuriating. And like I say in the book, how obviously infertility is it's a medical condition, it's a reproductive disease, and it's something that millions of people have. And you would never dare say to someone with cancer or a serious medical condition, you know what, just relax, stop thinking about it, just stop trying, just stop thinking about it, it'll go away. And it's the same with infertility. And the introduction in our book is in my book is from Dr. Russell Fook, who was our specialist in Utah from the Utah Fertility Center, who helped us have Spencer. And him and his wife actually had secondary infertility, so it took them 6 years to have their third child. So not only is he a world-renowned fertility specialist, but he also has a very personal experience with infertility. And he writes in the introduction about how one of the biggest misconceptions is that people just need to relax. And he says you wouldn't tell someone with cancer to just relax and it will go away, and infertility should be no different. And he has a really good introduction actually. So so that's the other point that I sort of make in the book, is just some of the stigmas and the myths and the misconception with infertility, and how best to support people. Because I found when we were going through it that the best thing someone could do was just to listen, just to be there, just to say, hey, what you're going through is hard, and how can I best support you, to not offer advice. So I know sometimes people can't help themselves, but it's like,
I think it takes the pressure off. I think we live in a culture where if someone tells us about their problems, it's like we want to fix it. We want to be able to go, society wants to be able to go, you've got a problem, here's a solution. Even if that's not the expert field, that's not they have any experience or any knowledge on. Whereas actually it takes the pressure off, doesn't it? It's like and I think everyone take this, whatever issue anyone ever comes to you, instead of trying to find a solution, go, that sounds really tough, what can I do for you? Ask them, because what they'll probably say is, you don't need to do anything, I'm not expecting you to fix my infertility.
I've got specialists for that.
Exactly. It's like I go and I get the knowledge, and it might be that you've heard of a book or you've heard of a website that is helpful. Great, you could send that link. I have that as a secondary after you've literally been like, is there anything I can do to support you? Because most people, they just want to be heard, and they don't need that's literally like that is my job. My job is people come and I listen, but I'm also coaching and I'm offering advice, and I'm saying, shall we look at this? Should we, that's my job. But I've got the training and the experience to be able to do that. Whereas someone just Joe blogs off the street and be like, oh, have you thought about this? They probably have, because they're going through infertility. We are the most clued up, educated community, because
absolutely
do it.
Absolutely. That's so true. Definitely are the most clued up, educated researchers. And absolutely. And you're right, it's when people are not experts. I mean, none of our fertility specialists ever said, I think all you need to do is just relax. Don't even bother with ideas. Just trying. Relax,
So just don't have unprotected sex this month, and it'll definitely happen.
It'll happen. Just go out for some drinks, go on a holiday. That's all you need. That's what we're going to prescribe you. So, when people, and it was always like, I found it was never good friends or family, thank goodness, with us. It was always more acquaintances or work colleagues or extended family. You've always got an auntie or an uncle or someone that would make these ridiculous, and I would find them hurtful comments. Because I think for me, whenever someone said just to relax, it made me feel like I was doing something wrong, and if only I had just relaxed, we'd be pregnant and we wouldn't be going through all this, and we wouldn't have cancelled cycles and failed cycles and miscarriages, because all I need to do is just, chill out, just take a walk along the beach or something. And, thanks to me being so stressed, we're not pregnant. And, it's absolutely ridiculous notion. So, again, that's something that I talk about in the book, one of those misconceptions and myths that, I think, as a society, we need to be better educated in. People, we need to create more awareness and education about what infertility, is, because there's just too much misconception at the moment.
And I think it's also because there are the stories out there of people like, we were trying for months and then we went on holiday and then it magically worked. It's like, or,
yes, of course,
special fertility statue in Italy. And then it went, it's like, we never know. We can never pinpoint, even with an IVF cycle, we can never pinpoint why that cycle works, but the 5 before didn't. And so I think it's really important. I was the same. People kept saying to me, like, even my doctor was literally like, you are very stressed and very anxious. And I was like, I'm very stressed and very anxious. I'm going through infertility. And so then learning, the key was them telling me about the mindfulness course and seeing a counsellor and working with a mindfulness coach. And she taught me how to be less anxious, how to be less stressed. It didn't magically mean that I then got pregnant, but it meant my quality of life while I was trying to conceive greatly improved. And that's absolutely. Chronic stress can impact our fertility. However, it's not as simple as, just don't be stressed. You need to teach someone how not to be stressed. And you need, and it's ongoing. It's not like you suddenly go, I've been an anxious person for most of my adult life. Oh, now I need to be calm. Okay, you can't just suddenly become a calm, non-anxious person, especially while for most of us, going through infertility is the most stressful thing.
Oh, exactly.
Experience, because it's our mind, it's our body, it's our future, it's our relationship, it's financial. It's all areas of our life. So for someone to just belittle all of that by going, you are stressed. Yes, thank you. I had noticed that about myself. It needs like so much more. So it's not discounting stress and going, if you're really stressed, you don't need to address it. It's more saying, don't blame the stress and therefore be stressed about being stressed, worried about being worried, anxious about being anxious. Address that by, well, like everyone obviously listening to this, you're listening to something that can help you address that. It's about taking action, but then really being aware that it's not, the reason you're not getting pregnant is very unlikely to be chronic stress. A very tiny percentage of people out there, they will literally be so stressed they've managed to prevent ovulation. Therefore,
which is fine.
But for most people, you're lining. You weren't really stressed for your lining.
No, and what's interesting, I recently was just had a general gynecologist checkup, totally unrelated to anything with fertility, obviously. And I said, I'm just interested, can you check my lining while you're at it? And sure enough, still nice and thin. Years later, nothing has changed. So she's like, oh, it's a bit thin. I was like, oh yeah, I know, that's my thing. So, and this was only a few months ago, and I was like, well, there you go. Years later, nothing's changed with the lining, So
it's the thing as well, isn't it, that maybe in like 10, 20, 50 years time, they'll understand the physicality of like why some women have thinner lining. They'll understand why, and therefore they will then be able to create some kind of thing to help remedy that. But until that point, I think even 30 years ago, the amount of knowledge we had then compared to now about endometriosis, it's still not on as much as it needs to have, but still a lot more and can understand it more. But we still don't really understand why it's linked to infertility. We don't know if it causes infertility, but it just so happens that most women with infertility happen to also have endometriosis. We don't know. But hopefully in 50 years time, they'll look back and people maybe listen to the episode and be like, oh my God, they didn't even know like what a lining or endometriosis, like they didn't even know what the problem was. So we're in the dark still. And so we're all fumbling around. This is why so many of us are sent to IVF and it doesn't work. We don't really know why we weren't getting pregnant. Like, I had like endometriosis, we had, I had ovarian cysts, I had IBS, I had all these physical issues, but then with both babies naturally. So then it was like, well, did I need to do the treatment or did I not? But at the time it was like, this is the best option for you.
Absolutely. And you got to try everything you can.
And you do, because that's the option that you have available at the time. It's only with hindsight then you're like, well, so that would be an interesting question. Do you feel like, if you, knowing what you know now about your lining and treatment, do you think you would do the same again, or do you think you might do things in a different order or different timescales?
No, I think I just wish I'd known more about the lining earlier. So I feel like if the specialist that we saw about the implantation issues, if we'd seen him first up, I feel like we would have had Spencer years ago. So because, he was very, matter of fact, and, said, look, the lining, it's rare, it's difficult to treat, we don't know what causes it, surrogacy is the best option. So if we'd heard all that information, 2 years earlier, then we would have just, trusted him and gone straight, for surrogacy. So, I just wish I'd known about it earlier, really. And look, there is some treatment options with thin lining. So they do try to firstly increase the estrogen. So that can sometimes cause a thin lining, and or sometimes like aspirin or what's it called, Clexane, like the blood thinner, to increase the blood flow and things like that. And those treatments have worked before for people. So, but they don't work for everyone, which was our case. So we did try a few different things, and I tried Chinese medicine and acupuncture as well. And just unfortunately nothing worked for us. And like I said, it was fascinating that my appointment a few months ago, it was like, oh, it's still thin. Nothing's changed years later. So, but that would be the only thing I just, wish I'd known about the lining issues earlier. But, our first specialist just didn't tell us about them. And if I hadn't kind of Googled, which, I'm usually anti-Googling because I think that, there's a lot of misinformation out there. But
and say whatever you wanted to say.
Oh, because she'd said, like, on one of the transfers that failed, she said, oh, your lining was a little bit thin. And I was like, oh, what lining? What's even the lining? I didn't even know about it. And she said, oh, we'll just give you a little extra estrogen for the next cycle because, your lining was a bit thin. But no, it's no big deal. Like, it's fine, kind of thing. So, of course, that night I was like, thin endometrium lining, what is it? And, found some medical journals, though, and studies that had said that, women with a lining, I think it was even under 8 or something, had, a low chance of falling pregnant and a high miscarriage rate. And under 6, it was like virtually impossible. And I was like, oh, my lining's like in the 4s and 5s. Like, what does that mean?
Maybe other specialists would just go, the lining's too thin. Like, obviously the threshold for that particular clinic and that particular specialist, they were like, their threshold was like here, whereas then your other, the threshold was here. And he was like, no. But again, they're looking at the same information, but their perspective, their understanding, their current education level. Whereas if this one said, oh, we'll do X, Y, Z for that very first cycle as well. I think what's really interesting is like with IVF Babble now are looking to sort of bring out, you can get more tests earlier on, and tests are more accessible for people, which is amazing. If it could be, you could Google it and then it'd be like, oh, here's a test for like an affordable price that is accessible without you having to go through. You obviously get your specialist guidance, and they're providing that as well through the site, but allows you to have ownership of, well, hang on, this is a question mark here of why this isn't working. Could I do this test to find out? Could I do this and this to support and help myself? So you're advocating for yourself. And as we all get more educated and we learn more, instead of going, oh, I've learned all of this, but now to get access to this test, I need to travel across the world and speak to this specialist who's got a waiting list of 8 months. It's like trying to make everything more accessible. And another thing to speak about then is about the grief cycle, and how for you, they obviously, your specialist said, I recommend surrogacy, but then you need time to go away and process that. So if you'd found that out a lot sooner, you may have then carried on and still been trying.
I would have done a few,
done those cycles, because you needed to prove to yourself it wasn't going to work, so that you
very true
leave that step and move to the next. So this is what I talked about in that episode about deciding to do treatment. It's like, you don't need to be 100% on board to go to the next step. You need to be 51% on board to go to the next step. But in order to get to that 51%, you need to have grieved the step before. Because you can't just go from trying naturally into Clomid or into IUI without grieving, not trying naturally anymore. And there is grief there, because you're stepping away from, all of us assume and want to get pregnant naturally. Of course we do. We don't want to have medical intervention and treatment and all these tests and all these hormones and all these injections. It's huge to go through. So you have to grieve that step. And for me, it was like, I just went into each treatment, I like so grudgingly and so like dragging my heels, and I was doing it, but I wasn't happy about it. Like, this is like, I feel like I have to do this. It was only when I got to my 4th cycle round that I was learning about the mind link, and I was like, I'm really not helping myself by, I don't want to get pregnant through treatment, but obviously I do want to get pregnant through treatment, because here I am. So I had this like foot on gas, foot on brake, that I was like, well, I'm here, but I want to get pregnant naturally, but I do want to get pregnant as soon as possible, so I'm doing treatment. And so it was so conflicting, and that was what was creating the majority of the anxiety in me, that I was like, I do not want to do treatment, but I'm told I have to do treatment. I've got endometriosis. I'm basically a ticking time bomb. The longer I leave it, all the endometriosis grows. It's sticking all my organs together in a big sticky mess of glue. Fantastic.
So, and look, for me, definitely there was a grief process in not, carrying, not being pregnant myself, and not carrying Spencer. And, so I didn't obviously get to experience, I was pregnant a couple of times, but didn't get to experience, pregnancy full term. And I didn't get to, have the pregnant belly and Spencer growing in me and feel him kick and also give birth. And, so there was definitely a grief process with that as well, and working through all of that. And, one comfort throughout it was that, I talked to a couple of women who had also done surrogacy, and they said, look, the moment your child is born and you hold, it was a boy pretty early on, the moment that you hold him, all those feelings will kind of melt away a bit, and they did. So, any sort of grief or jealousy or, pain or whatever about not carrying him, the minute I like held him and he was here and he was mine, I was like, couldn't care less that I didn't actually carry him at all. Like, and didn't, from that day on, it just, it's not something that's like worried me at all, but it certainly did in the lead up to him being born though. So that was definitely a grief to work through.
Those are things as well, to have someone to support you through that, because I imagine as well, like, the everyday person on the street is going to say possibly really helpful things like, oh, pregnancy was really hard, oh, aren't you lucky you don't have to give birth, and then you're like, you're so far off from where I am, you've now completely alienated me and our relationship. And so
true.
And this is also what can be really helpful to work with someone, within the fertility community, who understands all of the elements of this, because this is what they're doing day in, out, rather than someone literally being like, oh, well, saves you a job, and you just be like, it's just what? So true. Like having that space to, but also that's what's the joy in your book, is anyone considering surrogacy and maybe having these concerns of how's that going to feel to see a woman pregnant with my baby? How's that going to feel to like for her to give birth and to have a space to go like, you know, other women have experienced this, are experiencing this today. You have like a community of other women who were using surrogacy. Like, did you have other people to talk to who were like literally going through the same as at the time?
Yeah, I did. And yeah, like I said, I just feel like, you know, one of the few things that I just kept coming back to is they were like, once he's born, it won't matter. And, you know, it was so true. And all I felt was just love and gratitude when he was born. And I mean, the other big part though was that we had an amazing surrogate in Leah. And from the word go, she would say things to us like, I'm extreme babysitting, or I've got a hitchhiker on board. And she kept us so involved and, you know, communicated so much and was constantly sending, you know, me updates and you know, photos and ultrasound photos. And it just like, it felt like, you know, like I was pregnant as well. So I mean, I think that really made all the difference as well. It's just so inclusive. And you know, I said to her once, like, did you find it difficult to say goodbye to your other surrogate babies? This is when she was pregnant with Spencer, because she's been a surrogate for a couple in Spain a couple of years before. And she's like, no, I never saw him as mine. He wasn't, you know, genetically mine. He wasn't mine. And she said, I felt love for him, but the same as you feel for a good friend or a, you know, as an auntie, like, you know, for a niece and nephew. And she said, if anything, I was much more upset saying goodbye to his parents, because they were the ones who I had bonded with and had the relationship with. And she's like, you know, when I was crying, it was saying goodbye to them, not, you know, not the baby. So yeah, so that made a big difference as well.
And that's so insightful, because I've always wondered about that. And it's like how I think if you imagine before being pregnant, you imagine what being pregnant might be like. And I think the kind of fairy tale is, I chat to my baby every day in my womb and they're like my little, you know, whereas actually the reality is, you know, you're doing all the things. And so if you've got this vision of what you imagined it would be like for you, and then you put that onto, I imagine my surrogate is then doing it. Obviously she's not, and she's got her own kids and she's living her life. Like you say, I love that babysitting. It's like, I'm taking care of your baby until you come collect them. I love that energetically and emotionally, that just makes sense. And it's like, this isn't mine, this is yours. Well, he or she is yours, you know, before you find out the
helping out.
That helps your emotions and really seeing that. It's like, I haven't given my baby to her, she's looking after my baby for me. And just that
exactly. Makes all the difference, definitely.
This has been absolutely fantastic and so insightful for our listeners. Anybody listening, we would love you to come and connect and chat about how it feels hearing all of this and understanding. But before we get on to how you can connect with Kirstin, can you let us know your one nugget? If you could share, just if someone's like just tuning in now and hasn't listened to anything else, what would be your one nugget that you would like to pass on to listeners?
I would say to be an advocate. So as in to advocate for yourself. So whether it's with a specialist, so as we were saying before, whether it is, you know, coming to your appointments really prepared and having a checklist of questions and not being rushed out the door and not just accepting sort of vague answers and platitudes. And if you're not happy with your specialist, to get a second opinion, because that's what we did. And, you know, I was really grateful to do that. And then advocate with people in general, so that if people are saying to you, you know, just relax, or it'll happen when you stop trying, whatever, to, you know, to advocate for yourself and be like, no, actually, you know, infertility is a medical condition and it's something millions of people experience, and just relax, is not a medical cure, and you're not a fertility specialist. So
on your bike,
you know, see ya, but to, you know, sort of like stand up for yourself and advocate for yourself and be vocal, because I think that's something that I only did later on. And so, for the first couple of years when people would say that, I just thought, oh, okay, thanks. And then I just internalize it and I'd feel crap about it. And it just would upset me and it just wasn't helpful. And I wish, I had sooner said, actually, you need to realize that infertility is a medical condition, and just relax, it's not a medical cure, and appreciate you're not saying that. So that would be my advice, just to be your own advocate.
Fantastic. And tell us where we can buy your book.
Oh yes, so the usual places, so Amazon US and UK and Australia, Barnes and Noble, Target, Book Depository, Booktopia, so all the usual online platforms, or through my publisher, which is CNR Press, on their website. And in my bio on my Instagram at Straight Up Infertility, I've got all the links as well to where you can buy the book.
Fantastic. And where else can we follow you? So is Instagram the best place to connect with you?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So at Straight Up Infertility. So yes, and feel free, anyone, to contact me anytime. Send me a DM. I'm always happy to get them, and I love hearing from people, and I'll definitely respond. So feel free to connect anytime.
And thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so glad we managed to sort out a time that worked with both of us, UK and Oz.
Yes, my night is winding down now, so we're heading off to bed and you start the day. Yeah, that's right. No, thank you so much, Naomi, for having me on. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. So I hope everybody has enjoyed this episode. Please do subscribe to be the first to know when new episodes go live. We have some more expert interviews coming in the new year, so definitely check those out. And if you're interested in past interviews, you can go into the blog section on my website and just search for expert interviews, and they will all come up. You can see in the show notes below all of our contact details. If you're not already on my mailing list, please go to embracefertility.co.uk and you can sign up to get my latest free class and check that out, as well as a selection of MP3s and the first chapter of my upcoming book. Thanks, everyone. If you're interested in finding out more about what it's like to be supported by a fertility therapist, then please do visit my website. Just go to embracefertility.co.uk/coaching. I've not only been through infertility, IUI, IVF, ICSI, surgery, endometriosis, and a miscarriage myself before conceiving both of our children naturally. I've been working in this field for 10 years now. I'm trained in cognitive hypnotherapy, emotional freedom techniques, and advanced trauma release therapy. The way I work is to support you for a minimum of 12 weeks. The reason why I do that is I could give you an hour of my time, but that isn't what you need. What you need is me by your side for 12 weeks, and I will help teach you how to use your mind to support your body in doing what it is that you want, which is to become a mother. And I support people who are trying naturally, going through treatment, using donor eggs, sperm, and even surrogacy. There are many paths to parenthood. This is what I do day in, day out. If you'd like to find out more, go to my website, and then you can fill out the contact form to book in a free 30-minute chat with me if it sounds like I could be the right person to support you. We'll spend those 30 minutes talking about what support you need, what your intentions are for the coming months, and then at the end of the conversation, if it makes sense, we'll have a conversation about working together. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thanks.